It was a shock verdict which produced some of the most dramatic court scenes in recent times. Former water polo player Keli Lane collapsed in the witness box screaming when a jury today found her guilty of murdering her newborn daughter Tegan 14 years ago. During the 4-month trial, the prosecution said Keli Lane had been so desperate to keep her golden girl image, she decided to kill her baby girl rather than risk having a world of lies exposed. Deborah Cormel reports.
It was a dramatic end to an extraordinary trial, with paramedics rushed to the courtroom after Keli Lane collapsed, hysterical and screaming, as the jury delivered its verdict.
The courtroom was cleared, but as we were leaving, we heard the court officers attending Keli and saying, Keli, open your eyes. Keli, can you hear me? A doctor was called for.
It's a very difficult time for all of us. We've got a sentence to prepare for. Justice for Tegan. That's what I look at.
It's more than 14 years since Tegan Lane, just 2 days old, simply vanished. The last time she was seen alive was with her mother, Keli Lane, who left the hospital with her, then arrived home alone 4 hours later, just in time to head off to a wedding.
Now something's happened to the child. Now is the time to tell us.
I don't know. Nothing happened. Nothing has happened to her.
Even now, only Keli Lane knows what really happened to Tegan in those crucial 4 hours. Back then, her friends, family and the father of the child, former boyfriend Duncan Gillies, still had no idea she'd even been pregnant, and that Tegan was only one of 3 children she gave birth to in total secrecy.
Keli was a very convincing liar, and this is part of her nice girl image. She's used to being believed, and she's also somebody who is very capable of painting herself as being a victim and of making people feel sorry for her again, so people don't ask her too many questions.
Tegan Lane may never have been noticed missing at all if it wasn't for the 3rd child Lane tried to adopt out 3 years later. A child protection worker had been making some routine checks when he stumbled upon an astounding discovery. Lane had failed to tell authorities she'd already had 2 other children. And while the 1st child had been adopted out in 1995, Tegan, born a year later, seemed to have simply disappeared.
Her answers to my questions about Tegan were just no. All she said was no, and repeated that and then said, I don't know what you're talking about.
It was just the beginning of what would prove to be a marathon 11-year police investigation in which the terrible secrets of Keli Lane would finally come back to haunt her.
Do you want to tell me anything?
No.
Did you kill the child?
No, I did not. I did not do anything like that.
Someone else?
No.
Right, Keli, like I said, I'm going to have to make a lot of inquiries now. I'm going to have to go...
Please don't.
Excuse me, please.
Keli Lane has always maintained she'd hidden her pregnancies, convinced that her friends and family would abandon her. But according to the Crown Prosecutor, Mark Tedeschi, her real concern had been far more cold-blooded. Tegan and her other unwanted babies, he said, had been a threat to her career prospects and her future as a water polo champion. And even more critically, her image as the golden girl and daughter of Robert Lane, a local rugby hero and former policeman in the fiercely tribal beach community of Manly. Lane, he said, told so many lies she'd tied up police for years, deliberately sending them on a wild goose chase.
Her stories as to what happened to Tegan ranged from I took care of her and breastfed her for 6 months to outright denial that Tegan ever existed, to I gave Tegan to a couple I met just before she was born, and I think they live in Perth now.
In all, Lane gave 8 different versions of what happened to Tegan, prompting a nationwide dragnet including trawling through the birth dates and school records of more than 86,000 children. But the prosecution says it was her final version to police, that she'd given away the child to a man she'd had a brief affair with, that proved the most absurd lie of all, with Lane embroidering details as she went along, even mixing up the name of the father between Andrew Morris and Andrew Norris.
I said to him, "What about, can you take her?" Or take it.
What did he say?
Because I didn't know. Well, he wasn't really happy about it. He said that I'd trapped him. And that I was a slut.
Secretly recorded telephone intercepts revealed even Lane's own mother had trouble believing she'd give away her own child to a man she'd only met a few times, and the girlfriend he'd cheated on.
You've got to be telling the absolute truth, I'm telling you, because it's just so unlike a young bloke to want to raise a child. That's the thing I just can't sort of grip. But obviously that's what you agreed, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I didn't really have too many options.
Summing up the case, Justice Anthony Wheely had warned the jury that just because someone was a liar didn't mean they were a murderer. But the Crown said the recorded conversation showed that even after the coronial inquest into Tegan's disappearance, Lane's only concern had been for herself, not Tegan. Evidence she must have known the child would not be found because she'd killed her.
Yeah, I did make stupid choices, and I made continually stupid choices. But I can't tell you what sort of person I was then. People that didn't even notice, people that didn't even care enough to ask. People I obviously couldn't trust to speak out to, because my embarrassment was greater than my wanting to be helped.
Lane didn't give evidence at the trial, leaving her defence barrister, Keith Chappell, to speculate on a range of scenarios on Tegan's fate. But clearly 11 of the 12 jurors simply didn't buy it.
She's never lost any of her confidence or any of her arrogance, and this is someone who's facing a murder trial. All the way along, she's like she owned the place.
Rachel Chin's book on the secret life of Keli Lane is now due to be published early next year. But after 5 years of trawling through legal evidence and interviewing friends, Lane, she says, still remains a complete mystery.
In the 5 years between the coronial inquest and the murder trial in 2010, Sandy and Robert Lane aged 20 years physically. It took a big toll on them, you could tell, the stress. But Keli looked fresh.
Even before today's verdict, Keli Lane had already lost her job, her marriage was over, and according to Rachel Chin, most of her once huge band of friends had abandoned her. But it wasn't until today, when the jury declared her guilty, Keli Lane finally gave way to her grief.
I'm quite sure there are people in Manly who've known Keli and the Lanes all their lives, and they're looking through photo albums of 21sts, of nights out, other special times in their lives, and they'd see Keli there and they would think, who are you?
Deborah Cornwall with that report.